The plan wasn't meant for me to hear, but as I walked past the half-open dining room door, their voices spilled out. My name, the Christmas program, the laughter, a surprise segment, a joke costume, a line about oil stains. My family rehearsed it like a performance, each beat sharper than the one before. I froze, holding the gift I'd wrapped for them, feeling the heat of the lights and the cold of the tile under my boots. Hours later, Mom called, her voice shaking. "Where are you?" I didn't answer, because by then, the real surprise was already on its way. When I think about how all of this began, it never starts with Christmas. It starts years earlier in the Reed house in Plough, where everything looked perfect. Symmetrical frames, polished floors, soft gold lighting, but nothing ever landed softly. I was 18 the day I told my family I wanted to study automotive engineering. I remember the smell of dinner in the kitchen, something buttery, something warm. My father, Daniel Reed, owner of a chain of upscale furniture stores, was setting the table. When I spoke, he dropped a metal serving spoon. The clang echoed harder than it should have. My mother, Marlene, the one who coordinated charity galas and kept the family's image ironed flat, blinking slowly like she was buffering. My brother Aaron, older than me, a medical resident at the time, the family standard, lowered his eyes to hide a smirk. My younger sister, Belle, a part-time dental hygienist and lifestyle content creator, laughed outright, a quick, sharp sound. The spoon wobbled on the tile. I bent to pick it up, fingers brushing against the cool metal, leaving a faint smear of oil from the spark plug I'd been working on earlier. No one said it out loud, but the silence filled in the sentence for them. That's not what our family does. After that, the pattern settled in like weather. Marlene would slide job listings across the counter, office assistant, receptionist, never looking directly at me when she said this. Would be more stable. She'd gesture vaguely toward my hands, the faint lines of grease that never quite washed out, especially when you're around people. Aaron, when he visited home, would pat my shoulder with a doctor's practice sympathy. Just be careful with all that physical work, he'd say, as if I were one accident away from proving his point. Belle recorded videos in the living room, the ring light illuminating her hair as she told stories about finding balance and elegance. When I passed behind the camera, she'd wrinkle her nose for her audience. An inside joke they weren't supposed to understand. Oil fumes again, she'd laugh. Her viewers would fill the comments with little laughing emojis. I stayed quiet because that was the role I'd learned to play. My silence kept the house smooth, their image intact. Every time there was a gathering, cousins, church members, neighbors, I walked slower, kept my voice low, and made sure my boots didn't click too loudly on the floor. Quiet was safer. Quiet didn't get me pulled aside later for tone, posture, presentation. The memory that stays with me is small. Me standing at the sink washing dishes, the steam rising around my hands. Behind me, my family laughed at a joke I wasn't part of. I looked down at the water running over the oil-stained crescent near my thumbnail. That was the moment I learned what I was allowed to be in this house and what I wasn't. I arrived at my parents' house early that evening carrying a wrapped box. Small. Neat. Something I'd chosen after a long shift at the garage. The lights inside glowed warm against the winter dusk, the kind of glow that made the Reed house look welcoming from the street, even when it wasn't. I stepped in quietly. My mother, Marlene, was somewhere deeper in the house, rehearsing the Christmas program she coordinated for the church. My father, Daniel's voice floated down the hallway, steady and practiced. I followed the sound, passing framed photos where Aaron, the older brother, held up as the family's model, was always centered, and Belle, the younger sister, who curated her life online, always caught the best lighting. As I reached the dining room, I noticed the door wasn't fully closed. A narrow strip of golden light cut across the dark hallway floor. I didn't mean to stop, but I heard my name. Peyton Marlene said, as if trying it out for a joke. Laughter followed. Then Daniel's voice, low but clear. "She'll wear the jumpsuit, right?" "The blue one. It fits the theme." Aaron chuckled, the same soft, polite laugh he used with patience. "The toy car will get a reaction," Belle added, "and the line about oil stains, perfect. The church will love it." There was a rustle of paper, someone rehearsing a script, someone else fixing the timing. It took me a second to realize what they were doing. A skit, a Christmas skit about me, about my job, about the grease under my nails. And then Daniel said it like the punchline of a long-planned joke. "We'll read the will afterward. It'll land better that way." I felt the box in my hands grow heavier, the wrapping paper bending slightly under my grip. The hallway suddenly felt colder than the night outside. No one inside the room paused. No one sensed me standing there. I backed away slowly, keeping my boots silent on the tile the box held close to my chest. By the time I stepped outside, the truth sat clean and sharp. I had overheard my family's plan to humiliate me at Christmas. The cold hit me first when I stepped outside. Not the sharp kind that bites, but the dull, heavy cold that sinks through layers. I stood on the porch for a moment, holding the box I'd brought for them, the wrapping paper slightly crushed from how tightly I'd gripped it. Inside the house, the laughter continued, muffled now, but still bright, still rehearsed. I set the box down on the wooden bench by the door, brushed my thumb over the corner once, and walked to my truck. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just drove. The neighborhood. Lights blurred as I turned toward the highway. My phone buzzed twice. Texts from my mom's event group chat probably, but I ignored them. The only place open at that hour, and the only place that felt neutral, was a 247 gas station off the main road. Its neon lights were harsh buzzing, the pavement slick with a thin layer of frost. I pulled into a corner spot, turned off the engine, and let the silence settle. My hands rested on the steering wheel for several seconds, the faint smell of motor oil rising from the microfiber cloth tucked in my jacket pocket. That cloth had followed me through years of shifts at the garage, late-night emergency call-ins, long drives home. For the first time, I was grateful for its smell. It grounded me. I reached for my phone and called Noor Patel, my closest friend and my CPA. Noor had been with me since I opened the garage at 21. She knew my family's patterns, understood the silence I'd carried into adulthood. When she answered, her voice was steady like always. "You okay?" she asked. I didn't answer that. Instead, I said, "Can you check the lease folder for the LLC?" My voice surprised even myself. Flat, steady, almost businesslike. There was a pause as Nora clicked through her files. I watched the neon lights flicker on the wet concrete. "Okay," she said. "Got it. Why? Just open it." I heard her scrolling, then stopping, then scrolling again. "Peyton, are you sitting down?" "I'm in my truck." "You need to look at this," she said. "Right now." I opened the folder on my own phone, something I rarely did after hours, and the document list appeared. Payments, lease agreements, notices, ownership forms. My stomach tightened. I clicked the lease for the commercial property in Plano. The property my father's flagship furniture showroom was housed in. The one he bragged about every Christmas, every Thanksgiving, every fundraiser. The pride of Daniel Reed. The tenant name blinked back at me. His LLC, the landlord name, blinked back at me too. Mine, no. My personal name. My real estate LLC. The one Noor helped me set up when I was 25. The one I'd used to invest in small industrial lots around Dallas. I knew I owned the property. Of course I did, but I had never connected it emotionally to them. Not until that moment. I scrolled further. Payment logs, 3 missed payments. A pending increase in market rent significant. A clause about non-renewal that I had highlighted months ago when Nora told me the market was shifting. At the time, it felt like professional due diligence. Now it felt like something else entirely. "They're using your property," Nora said quietly. "And they're behind." I leaned back against the seat. The neon light buzzed overhead, rhythmic and cold. For a long moment, I didn't speak. I just let the information settle. Not like a revelation, but like a slow, inevitable truth finally reaching the surface. "What do you want to do?" No asked. I stared at the lease. At the rent calculations Nor had written in the margins months ago. At the notices I hadn't sent yet. Never connected it emotionally to them. Not until that moment. I scrolled further. Payment logs, 3 missed payments. A pending increase in market rent significant. A clause about non-renewal that I had highlighted months ago when Nora told me the market was shifting. At the time, it felt like professional due diligence. Now it felt like something else entirely. "They're using your property," Nora said quietly. "And they're behind." I leaned back against the seat. The neon light buzzed overhead, rhythmic and cold. For a long moment, I didn't speak. I just let the information settle. Not like a revelation, but like a slow, inevitable truth finally reaching the surface. "What do you want to do?" No asked. I stared at the lease. At the rent calculations Nor had written in the margins months ago. At the notices I hadn't sent yet. at the folder of templated documents waiting for me to fill them out. The answer came easier than I expected. Everything by the book. Okay, she said already, shifting into work mode. Then let's start. I set my phone on the dashboard mount and opened the laptop I kept in the back seat for late-night paperwork. The screen cast a pale light across the truck's interior, catching the tiny scratches on the steering wheel, the dust on my boots, the faint oil stains on my nails. Nor talked me through each step. I opened spreadsheets, checked payments, calculated overdue amounts, cross-referenced lease clauses, prepared a notice of default, prepared a notice of non-renewal, updated the market rate increase based on the latest comps, linked ownership verification documents, drafted the cover letter for courier delivery. Each step had weight, not emotional weight, but procedural, clean, controlled, a kind of clarity I hadn't felt in years. At one point, Noor said, if they planned a Christmas lesson for you, this is just your gift in return. I didn't laugh. I didn't even smile. My fingers paused above the keyboard. It's not a gift, I said, it's a line. She understood. When the packet was ready, signed, time-stamped, uploaded, I sat still for a full minute. The station was nearly empty. A distant truck hummed as it passed. Somewhere behind me, a vending machine whirred to life. I pressed send to courier. The confirmation pinged softly. I closed the laptop, wiped my hands on the cloth in my pocket, and looked out at the dark highway stretching ahead. This time, I said into the quiet, I won't fix what they've broken. Christmas Eve at the church always looked the same. Soft lights, poinsettias lining the stage, the camera crew setting up as if the Reed family were part of the program itself. My mother, Marlene, thrived here. She moved through the hall, adjusting garlands, nodding at volunteers, perfecting what she called the atmosphere of generosity. I wasn't there, but my absence didn't register at first. Inside the banquet room, the early arriving relatives were settling in. My father, Daniel, was rehearsing lines for his short speech. Aaron, the older brother, celebrated like a trophy, adjusted his tie in a mirrored pillar. Belle, always angling for the best frame, checked her phone's front camera every few minutes, smoothing her hair between takes. The courier arrived at 6:47 p.m. He slipped through the decorated hallway past a child choir practicing carols. He carried a stack of envelopes, white, clean, official. He asked for Marlene Reed by name. She smiled, assuming they were last-minute donations or RSVPs. When she tore open the first envelope, the expression on her face broke cleanly. First confusion, then a small precise shock, like a bulb flickering before it burns out. The pages inside slid neatly onto the table under the bright lights. Notice of default, notice of non-renewal, revised market rent, payment, ledgers, ownership records listing landlord Peyton Reed. Her hand trembled. Paper rustled as she flipped pages too quickly. Daniel stepped closer. What is that? Marlene didn't answer. Aaron took one page to read, his jaw tightened. Mom, this is the showroom lease. Belle leaned over his shoulder, eyes widening. Wait, Peyton owns the building. The pastor, standing at the doorway, coyly stopped giving instructions to the camera crew. Someone dimmed the stage lights. Even the murmurs from the children's choir seemed to fade. One of my aunts whispered, why would Peyton send this tonight? Marlene's voice finally returned, thin, unsteady. No, this has to be a mistake. She wouldn't. She doesn't. But the bottom of the ownership record still read the same landlord, Peyton Reed. Not her mechanic daughter, her silent daughter, her invisible daughter, the one she tried to turn into a seasonal joke. At 7:02 p.m., Daniel tried calling me. When I didn't answer, Marlene grabbed her phone. Her earrings shook with the force of her movement. She stepped out of the banquet room, pressing the phone hard against her ear. The first call went to voicemail. The second, too. On the third, I answered. I was standing outside the cabin in Colorado snow, drifting across the porch. I could hear her breath before her voice, ragged, thin, frantic. That night, I would remember later, Mom called furious. Where are you? She demanded. Behind her, I could hear chairs scraping, relatives, whispering the distant edge of someone crying. She wasn't asking because she cared. She was asking because her perfect program had cracked, and she needed me to help her seal the edges before anyone else noticed. The snow collected along the railing as I watched flakes settle on my gloves. Noor was inside chopping vegetables, humming softly. The cabin was warm, but the cold air felt cleaner. I didn't answer her question. Instead, I said slowly, Evenly. Did you enjoy my gift? The silence on her end wasn't dramatic. It was worse. Small, stunned, collapsing inward, a silence that recognized, maybe for the first time, that I had stopped orbiting them. Peyton. She tried again, softer now, almost pleading. But the wind shifted, and her voice thinned out into the static. I won't discuss this tonight, I said. All communication can go through the LLC inbox. Her breath caught. You can't. I already did. I let the silence sit for a moment. Not as punishment, but as distance finally measured. Then I hung up. The snow kept falling. The phone stayed still in my hand, inside the cabin, nor sent another log on the fire, and for the first time in years, I felt nothing pulling me back toward Plano. The morning after Christmas, the cabin was quiet in a way the Reed house had never been. No stage decorations, no curated lighting, no soft rehearsed laughter leaking through doorways, just the scent of wind threading through the pines and the soft crackle of the fireplace, nor had started before sunrise. I sat on the small porch with a mug warming my hands. The snow had fallen heavily overnight, burying the steps in a smooth, unbroken sheet of white. My boots left the first marks when I stepped out there, each print sinking cleanly into the surface. Inside, No moved around the kitchen, her presence steady and unobtrusive. She didn't ask about the call, or the documents, or the fallout. She knew better than anyone that silence could be a kind of shelter. I checked my email only once. A message from Daniel. My father sat at the top. Short, no greetings, no scolding, just logistics about transferring operations, points of contact, payment timelines, professional, measured, the kind of email he would send a vendor or a landlord. For the first time, he was speaking to me in the role I had built for myself. I replied in the same tone, short, CL boundaried. Then I closed the inbox. The rest of the morning passed in small movements. I swept snow from the railing, brought in firewood, tightened a loose hinge on the cabin door. It felt good to fix something where the repair didn't cost me pieces of myself. When the sun rose higher, the light shifted across the clearing, catching on the thin crescent of oil that stained my thumbnail, still there from the night I left the house. In Plano, it had been the punchline. Out here, it was just a mark of the work I'd chosen. I stayed on the porch until the cold pressed gently at my fingertips and the air steadied in my lungs. There was no rush to return, no expectation to meet, no version of myself I had to shrink into, just the snow, just the quiet, just the space to finally breathe. Boundaries aren't punishment. They're the quiet shape of what you refuse to carry anymore. Standing on that porch, watching the snow erase every footprint behind me, I understood something simple. Distance can be a form of respect, both given and taken. If stories like this stay with you, if they echo something you've lived or something you're still trying to leave behind, stay close to this channel. There are more truths to tell, and more silences worth breaking.